This is the eLearn podcast. If you're passionate about the future of learning, you're in the right place. The expert guests on this show provide insights into the latest strategies, practices, and technologies for creating killer online learning outcomes. My name's Laddick, and I'm your host from Open LMS. The eLearn podcast is sponsored by eLearn Magazine, your go-to resource for all things online learning. Click-by-click how-to articles, the latest in edtech, spotlight on successful outcomes and trends in the marketplace. Subscribe today and never miss a post at elearnmagazine.com. And Open LMS, a company leveraging open source software to deliver effective, customized, and engaging learning experiences for schools, universities, companies, and governments around the world since 2005. Learn more at openlms.net. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the eLearn podcast. My name's Laddick, but as I like to say, the show is not about me, even though you get to see me every week. This show is about my guest, Mr. David Dye. How are you, David?
Laddick, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. I've been looking for this conversation for a little while now. We scheduled, and then we had to reschedule and whatnot. But that's life. That's how it works.
It is. But I'm glad we're here now.
Yeah. Where do we find you sitting in the world?
Right at this moment, I am in Laurel, Maryland. For those unfamiliar, it's about halfway between Washington, D.C. and Baltimore.
Laurel, I've driven around Laurel. It's fantastic. I spent 4 or 5 years of my life in that part of the world. Fantastic. David, we're going to talk about creating training that creates lasting culture change, which I think is really it's important to me. It's a fun topic because we're not going to be talking about necessarily about training itself, but like actually how do you break culture barriers? How do you move? How do you make movement within an organization that creates real change, which I think is really fantastic. Before we do that, set the stage for us, please. Who are you? Where did you come from? What have you been doing? Why should we listen to you?
Well, I started my career in the education space. Actually, I was a teacher and a mentor in a nonprofit human service organization that intersected really in that space between education and helping underserved kids who have really significant needs. And so I got to do a really cool blend of teaching and education development and then educational leadership. And eventually rose up in that organization, started at the very beginning, eventually chief operating officer, and then helped replicate it around the United States as the CEO of that organization. And so that was 17 years in that career. Wow. And then when I retired from that, started my own business doing what I found I enjoyed most, which was leadership development and helping people become the best version of themselves. And so that's the mission here. And for every group of people that together can be more than they are individually, that's what leadership's all about. So started in my business, met my partner, Karen Hurt, online, not the swipe right or swipe left kind. We met because we were both writing about leadership and we realized we were very much aligned. And we decided after a couple of conversations over a couple of years, let's collaborate, let's do something together. And so we wrote a book together called Winning Well, A Manager's Guide to Getting Results Without Losing Your Soul. And that was our first collaboration effort. We both had solo efforts before that. And since then, we've merged our businesses. We got married, fell in love, became really good friends first, then the fell in love, get married, merge the businesses. And so today, Let's Grow Leaders, we are in our, 11th year of business here and helping folks around the world with human-centered leadership development that's super practical that you can take and do something with right away. So that's the short story. And we have a new book coming out in May called Powerful Phrases for Dealing with Workplace Conflict. So that's what we're up to.
I love it. And I love I love the story that, usually you hear about the classic entrepreneur, and then it's the married couple that start the business and then they actually, it ends up falling apart and they get divorced. So I love hearing the reverse funnel of, we were all kind of both doing this thing, but then actually we found out that,
it brought us together.
Yeah, maybe we did swipe right the whole time.
Well, I feel the need to clarify. I would have swiped if it's right or left or whichever direction it is. I actually don't know. So let's say it's right. I would have swiped that way.
It's always right, my friend. It's always right. Yeah, yes is always right. At least I think. I'm going to leave it there. Tell me about what this means. So we're talking about creating lasting culture change in
Yeah.
an organization, in a school, in an institution, in, a place of learning, be that a department or, a, a Fortune 500 company. What are the key elements of this? Like what does that boil down to at the end of the day? How do we start seeing culture change, or what do we need to do in order to move that forward?
Yeah, I that's such an important question because to me, any training, any learning that we're doing organizationally in that environment, if it doesn't lead to culture change, why are we doing it? Why are we
Mhm.
spending our time, money, emotional investment, all the rest of it? But I want to step back for just a second and define terms. What do we mean by culture
Okay.
in this context, right? So my favorite definition of culture is Seth Godin, the marketing guru. He says culture is simply people like us do things like this. So it's what people like us do.
Mhm.
So to me, learning has a very direct impact on culture. Learning should change. Organizational learning should change what people are doing and what people like us do in this organization and this school, this business, this civic organization. It doesn't matter what it is. It's what people like us do. So to me, learning should have a direct impact on culture change. If it doesn't, we're wasting our time, energy, and resources.
Okay, cool. So break it down, like, if I'm going to start that process, how do I, like, what should I be looking at first? Is this like a wholesale change? Is this an iterative process? Where do I even look for these? What needs to be changed?
Yeah. Well, there's a number of ways to do that, but the easiest is if you look at a now, where are you now? Where do you want to be? And what's the gap? And
Hmm.
let's take a look at that. So, and that can come a number of different directions. It may be with technical skills. All right. In order to achieve these learning outcomes for our students, we need to improve our game here. We
Hmm.
need to help people cover more ground, say, help our students cover a year and a half or 2 years in order to catch them up to where we'd like them to be. Is that possible in a year? All right. If it is, what technical skills do we need to achieve to do that? Well, there's going to be a learning associated with that, right? That's one example. Let's say that we're trying to do some value shift. Many organizations grow to a certain size and then they realize, you know, we haven't paid a lot of attention to our values, but this is what's really important to us. Now, how do we infuse that through the organization and make those things more than just signs on a wall?
Hmm.
And again, where are we now? Where do we want to be? What's the gap? What's the learning that needs to take place? And so that's the at the simplest level, that's what we're talking about. Same thing for leadership development. All right, if we want to have our organization, we need to lower our attrition, improve our retention, improve our productivity and job satisfaction, and make a sticky culture that people want to be a part of, even if we're not paying the very top wage in our industry. All right, where are we now with our leadership and management skills and abilities? Where do we want to be? What's the gap? That's what we need to learn. So that's where we're looking to start that process is, I think, always going to be the same. And then it's what tools and techniques are we bringing to ensure that that lasts.
Before we talk specific tools, um, talk to the um, uh, what's the word I'm looking for here? How do you bring everybody along? That's what I want to ask. And so, especially when you're talking about a growing organization and where you're talking about, especially organization of any critical size, there's going to be a lot of different opinions and a lot of different needs associated and different personalities
Yeah.
that are in that organization. Are there different considerations about how you communicate to different groups or different people, or what do you do when people say, no, I'm not on board?
Yeah. So, first thing, I'm going to try not to bring everybody along and realize that's okay.
Mm.
That if we are in a certain place, let's say we're here, and where we want to be is here, not everybody that's here is going to want to go here. They're here because they're comfortable,
Mhm.
and that's okay. There is nothing wrong with that, and there's nothing wrong with them. And so to acknowledge that when we change, not everybody is going to want to come along, and that's okay. And that's really hard. I mean, I say that nice logical statement. That's really hard for my heart to to get wrapped
Yeah,
around
of
because I
course.
want to take everybody with
Mhm.
me. Excuse me. but it's not always possible. So I just need to start with that understanding that maybe not everybody's going to want to go. If they do, great, but I need to be open to the possibility they won't. And then I'm going to start with my early adapters. I'm going to start with that 10 or 20% of folks who are aligned right there. And I want to build energy there. Then there's, in any kind of change, anything you do, there is typically, 10, 20% kind of that are like, yeah, let's do this. There's 10 or 20% are like, I don't know, no. And then there's that middle that are a little ambivalent. I'm going to focus on the energy first. So let's get the energy going first, get our early adapters in, get our senior leaders. And this goes to the making change stick and make lasting change in terms of our learning. So senior leaders, early adapters, anybody where I can find energy and who's on board. And we're going to build that momentum there. That will help start bringing that 80% along, and then help that other 10 or 20% to decide, do they want to go where the other 80% of the organization are going or not?
Right. Absolutely. So take me to the tools. Like you talked about, finding those early adopters and the senior leaders, about, starting to create momentum with energy when you've made these decisions, or a gap has been recognized. What specific tools do you counsel or work with your clients on to enact this kind of change?
Yeah, our clients who have the best success in terms of changing the culture through whatever learning they're doing, there's a real integrated effort. And so several aspects of that. You've got your core leader-led learning. There's instructor-led learning that's happening in some fashion. You've got the e-learning components, which, there's so many different, that may be recordings of those instructors. That may be, all of the things that you can put in an LMS, and right, so that you've got all of those resources. So we kind of have that core learning that we're all familiar with. From there, some of the other elements that we have found to be really helpful in producing that change. One is the micro learning, which is so popular now, but to use that in the way that is going to be effective. Why are we using it? What's the gap? What are we trying to do? Well, in any kind of learning, there's that moment of recognition of a tool. Let's say, wow, that would be a really helpful communication tool for me to use. And so you go, oh, wow, yeah, I want to do that. But then an hour later, I'm back into the flow of my normal day and things are happening. And, I've got this parent who's upset, or I've got this customer who needs, or my boss is breathing down my neck, and I've forgotten. And so a good use of micro learning is to help people recall and refresh their learning, and then be able to use it. So in our programs, any learning always has an action learning component that goes with it. How am I taking action on whatever it is that I have learned? So there's some accountability for that, right? The follow through there. I'm applying, not just absorbing. I've got the micro learning that once or twice a week is coming through either email, text, SMS message, or something like that. That is giving me a 30 to 90 second, maybe 2-minute dose of asking me to recall what I learned, to do something with it, to answer a question about it, maybe to reflect on my own status with regard to a skill I'm learning. And so that's the micro learning component. And then another, and I actually consider this, if you really want to create culture change through your learning, whether it's e-learning, instructor-led, any kind of learning, if you really want to create lasting culture change, you have to have leaders involved. Okay. And when I say leaders, I'm talking about managers, supervisors, on up, all the way up to the CEO. So the more of that we can get involved, we can talk about that, but the more involvement you can have there, and there's different ways to negotiate that and make it happen, but it creates ownership, and it creates the momentum that we talked about earlier, that you can help some of your, that 10, 20% that I don't know if I want to do this, really helps them make a decision one way or the other.
Let's go down that path then. When we're thinking about engaging leadership in any kind of learning, and especially in learning specifically designed to create culture change, what are your recommendations for bringing them along? I mean, is this, I'm a line worker for the day kind of thing, or I'm going to go visit, my satellite office and show up and kind of be a guest, in the training room, if we even have training rooms anymore,
or the virtual
is
training room,
or is it making making a fanfare about, yes, I'm a part of this training as well. Like, what, I guess, give me your scenarios for, everything from line manager up through sort of supervisor, vice presidents, C-suite, how they would engage differently to not only show commitment, but actually like living, I guess walking the walk, as we would say.
Yeah. One of our very favorite ways, and again, where the organizations have the most success doing this, twofold. So first is getting senior leaders when you're talking about a particular, let's call it piece of learning. Let's say we're learning what a value looks like in practice, or we're learning about a particular type of leadership approach, or we're learning about a skill set that's really important for our frontline employee, whatever it is that we're learning. The first is senior leader storytelling. And this isn't a senior leader just expounding like, I won back in my day it's not that. It's about conflict. So you take two of these critical pieces of learning. Let's take two values. All right. Let's say, this is a real organization I'm thinking of. We go the extra mile for our customer, right? That they have that white glove. We go the extra mile, but they also had a work-life balance, employee health value.
Ooh, there's some tension there.
Right. Sure. So automatically now we've got, and for any organization, your values will most likely have the opportunity for conflict. It's just the nature of values. And so what a lot of organizations do, they put them on the wall, they forget about them. And then people are like, I don't know. And they choose one and they live that, if anything, and the others go the wayside. Mm-hmm. Well, to have senior leaders talk about, when I was trying to manage my own work-life balance and my own emotional health, and I had this client who had this really crazy need, and then they'll stop and say, what would you do? And hear them out. And then they'll finish the story. Well, here's what I did, and here's what I would do now. And here's how we balance that conflict, that intersection. Here's how I would navigate that. And there aren't any easy answers, but in the intersection here, this is what should take precedence, or this should. And so you tell stories about what it looks like in real life, and it makes them not just things on a wall, but real practices. Same thing with practical communication skills. Listen, one time in my career, I realized I had this is a real story for me. I had a bunch of education leaders and amazing, amazing people, really motivated. And in the fall, they were overwhelmed as academic calendar year would start. They're overwhelmed with all that needs to be done. And there were just projects and deliverables going missing left and right. And I was their leader. I was effectively, in a school context, I was effectively the principal of that organization. And I'm like, what do I do? And so I started looking for answers, realized, okay, this is on me as a leader. It's a communication problem. And so there's a principle, make the invisible visible. All right. Learning for me. How did I learn that? With this situation, I started a scorecard so that everybody could see where they were on their deliverables. It was public. We all shared it. And they're really motivated, good folks. They didn't want to have something missing on their scorecard. So it helped them prioritize, manage their own stuff. And without doing anything else but a public scorecard, completion rates rose up to like 85%. Right. Wow. So as a senior leader, I might tell that story if I was illustrating that concept of making the invisible visible, and what we call 5x5 communication. If it's truly important, how are you communicating it 5 times, 5 different ways, and getting all the different things that help us internalize critical messages. So storytelling, that's the first one.
Okay.
And I'll pause there, see if you have any reflection on that. Then I want to take you number 2, which I'm really excited about.
How much? So before you take me to number 2, when you're storytelling, what's your counsel on level of vulnerability and sharing of fails?
I love it. And I think it is so valuable for senior leaders to share their fails. Like, that's what I just did. This was a fail I had. I was not succeeding. And it sent me in search of answers. And then I learned, and then I was able to overcome. But that's a journey every human being is on. So if, as a senior leader, your stories are always about your own perfection and your own amazingness, nobody can relate with that. Well, sure, you could be that way because you're amazing and you're perfect. Guess what? That's not my reality. And it's not the reality for anyone else listening to you. So as a senior leader, if you're only sharing successes and here's what I did, you're alienating, you're putting yourself up on a pedestal that no one else can reach, and you're demotivating your team. And what's worse, you're creating an environment where it's not safe for them to learn or grow or improve. And of course, here on this show, that's not what we want. We want people learning and growing. Well, that involves some failures, some risks, some stumbles along the way. So share yours, so it's okay for other people to have theirs.
Absolutely. I think it also, it's just that it's that creation of safety, right? Yeah, you can trust me that you're going to be safe if you take these risks within guardrails, obviously, I'm sure, within parameters.
Yeah. And hopefully we're defining that and creating that atmosphere and everything else. Yeah, for sure.
Of course. So take me to number 2. What's your second favorite tool?
Yeah, number 2, leader-led learning. So this is where we get leaders involved in the learning process. So if they can be on the learning journey themselves or in advance of your kind of focused participant group. So let's say we've got frontline leaders who are the main focus group for whatever development process that you're engaging in. And you've got some senior leaders. Are they intimately familiar with what those frontline learners are going to learn? If not, we need to get them involved too, either in mixed cohorts, or what a lot of organizations will do, they'll put their senior leaders through like a month or 2 ahead of the other group. And then this is the critical part. And we call these challenge support groups. You can think of them as mentoring circles. They go by a lot of different names, but what we'll do is pair up senior leaders. So let's take a senior leader over here and a senior leader over here. You guys are a pair. And together, once a month, about 2 or 3 weeks after the core learning has happened for this group of participants, those 2 senior leaders are going to get together with a subset of 7 to 10 of the participants from across the organization. So it's not just their direct reports, people from across the organization who otherwise don't know each other. And they're going to debrief the material, the learning objectives for that month, the tools that they got, starting with, okay, here's what we talked about. Before we do anything else, let us senior leaders tell you how we're using this. Mm-hmm. Here's what we're doing with it. Here's how the difference it's making for us. Love to hear from you. What's your experience? What challenges are you running into? What's your experience? So again, making it safe. We're really going to talk about this. And that has so many benefits. First, senior leaders modeling the way. They're leading by example. They're teaching it in essence through their own examples. So that's going to hold your senior leaders accountable for actually implementing, because they know they're going to be looking at a group of direct reports. Don't all report to them, but report to their peers and saying, here's what I'm doing with this. Well, they have to be able to say, here's what I'm doing with this. So it creates some accountability for modeling the way at the front end. Then you've got people from across the organization, participants who are looking at people in other departments or other teams and going, oh, that's how you're, oh, this is really happening. And it creates momentum because it creates that shared experience. The third thing you're doing is creating a common vocabulary. And again, culture is what people like us do. You're changing the culture because you're creating those connections. Oh, this is what people like us do. This is what we're doing. So I need to figure out how to do this, or I really need to be honest about here's where I'm struggling and here's where I could use some help. And then you're getting that senior leader support for those folks, or peer support. The organizations who have done this that we have worked with, without fail, have seen their learning programs stick. The culture change happens over time. And a lot of those groups will propagate, and they'll continue long after the formal program is ended. They love the conversations, and they build the safety, that psychological safety that you were mentioning. They build that, and they want to continue those conversations long after.
I always love it when you have a group that comes together and, you connect with 2, 3, 4 people in that group, and, it ends up becoming these unexpected friendships or unexpected connections throughout a time in your career or whatever. I'm thinking right now of an individual who I was put in an office with him, and, he's still one of my best friends, 25 years later, here we are, so there you go. What are the stumbling blocks along the way? I mean, it's always so easy to talk about these processes, like you were talking about leader-led learning and, microlearning and whatnot. It's easy to talk about them in terms of success, but like, for example, dial it back for 1 second on that, putting these cohorts together, having leaders, lead the way with it, but also then convene these groups and whatnot. What are the challenges that you found and the stumbling blocks along the way, and the how can we avoid those missteps?
Yeah. So the 2 things to be aware of up front. you really do have to have, I'm going to call it executive, depending on how big your organization is. And that might be the CEO, that might be your lead instructional leader. It might be who depending on your organization. But if you're going to do that, you have to have executive support. And there is no substitute for the CEO saying that this is vital to the success of our organization, to our outcomes for our students, for the bottom line of what we're doing. And it is my expectation that everyone is doing it. And if possible, I will be too. I mean, that's ideal, right? And when we see that, I mean, it's off the charts effective. So getting that senior leader support and buy-in is important. And when you're talking about obstacles and stumbling blocks, that can take some work, particularly if you're coming from, let's say, learning and development or human resources, or you're more junior in the organization. If that's the case, go as high as you can get the buy-in you can, and get that. You're still going to have more success with whoever you're able to get involved, and go from there. The second, and I think you're hinting at this, but the logistics takes some work. And so, again, in the most successful organizations, to solve that, what they have done is they've had one person internally whose job it is to figure out who's in which groups, to coordinate those times, to help establish, something online, and whether it's in the LMS or whatever else is going to be there. But this is kind of a group place for your group. If they're meeting online, if they're meeting in person, where that's going to take place, when, and making sure that that's on everybody's calendars. If you have one person getting all that out, or maybe a team of 2 or 3 people, depending on how big your company is, that can go a long way to helping with those logistics. So that logistical support is very helpful and can be a stumbling block if it's unaddressed.
Does this work or not work depending upon the size of an organization? I guess, and I'm going to reverse the question. Is there a scale at which this does not work? Right. So I could see, an organization that's 100 people, like Open LMS, or so, 100, 150 people or so, that kind of coordination, and that kind of team feeling is relatively simple to create and maintain. If I start thinking about 1,000, 2,000, get up to 5,000, like, at what point are we able to even start to nudge what culture means and how it changes? Like, I'm just going to leave it right there on the table and see what you say.
The first thing I'm going to say is yes, it scales, because leadership scales. And if you have people taking that responsibility and doing that, it'll work. And so we've seen, let's say, organizations with 7 or 8 tiers, right, that are very large organizations. These senior leaders can do those groups with their direct reports, who are the people in the next line, but again, that are cross-functional, so that they're meeting each other, so that they're not just in chain of command situations. And then those folks do it with these folks do it with these folks. And so there are ways to make it work and scale. But it's that the principle of seeing a person a level or 2 above you, using the tools, using the learning, talking about their challenges, asking you about your experiences, and supporting you in your own implementation. That's the principle. And so doing that in small groups, totally scalable.
I'm gonna ask you one curveball before I let you go, which is, what's your favorite unexpected aha that came out of working with one of your clients in this? Like, either where it was, that we did not see this coming at all, or like, some piece of jargon that came out that is now, like, the motto for the company, or what, like the slogan, or what? Like,
yeah. So I'm going to,
I
know a lot of your listeners, viewers here are in education, but I'm going to take this to a sales team. We're working with a sales organization. And, the cliches about salespeople is that they often hate learning. And it's not that they hate learning, right? They hate not selling. Like, any time that takes them away from their commission, like, this is a waste of time. Get me back to my selling, right? And that's a cliche, but it exists for a reason. There's some truth to it, right? So we're very sensitive as we go and start working with the sales organization. And they have got hundreds of sales leaders going through this program. So we're like, all right, what are we going to do here? Let's do 30 minutes. These are going to be super focused, leader-led challenge groups, 30 minutes. within 6 or 8 weeks throughout the organization, the salespeople came back and said, "This is so valuable. Can we extend the time?"
Mm.
And we were floored. We're like, "Okay, yes, please extend the time."
Yeah.
So that to me is a demonstration. A, we were shocked and surprised. B, even more importantly, it is a demonstration that if someone who is time dependent for their commission, their bonuses, is willing to trade 15 or 30 minutes of that time for that experience, that tells you how valuable it is.
And I think you can extend that to anybody who's on a support desk, who's got tickets they've got to answer, anybody who's, time sensitive, like first responder, critical, I have to be there. Like those are all people who are like, if I walk away from the desk, it better be good, kind of thing. That's great to hear.
Exactly. And that to me just tells you how valuable it is.
Just want to iterate a comment here. We had just actually had come in from Douglas Edwards. He says, it seems like the things your guest is talking about should be more of an HR leadership function. Training may not be seen having authority to initiate these, which are cool. Any thought about that? Like, I think we've been blurring the line between, is this a leader-led thing, or is this like coming from the learning department, or that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So when I'm in a learning department conversation like that, I want to engage whatever senior leader I can get a hold of. Somewhere there's got to be some sponsorship, and what are the business outcomes you're trying to achieve? So if you're in a true large organization, you're in the learning development part of that organization, and they see you as an order taker, or, hey, I need these things done and that kind of thing for my people. Okay, we need to take that to the next level. What are the business outcomes? I need to build those relationships with some of those other senior leaders. Who are my sponsors? What are the business outcomes that they want to achieve? The reason they're investing. And then I'm going to say, do you really want to see that happen? And of course, they're going to say, yeah. All right. If we really want to see that happen, we want to change the culture here to achieve these things. Here is my recommendation, my invitation. And when you're starting something like that, if you're the first to bring it into your organization, don't try to engage 100 senior leaders. Start with 3. Say, can I get 2 or 3 people, back to our early adopters, who might be willing to do this? And if you can get a proof of success by trialing, do a trial, do a test, and taking a subset of your learners, say, maybe I can get 4, or if I can only get 2, can I get them to do, one of them does one group, one of them does the, it's better to do it in pairs, but whatever you can do to trial it, and you'll get proof of concept. And I guarantee that your outcome markers, whatever you're using to evaluate the success of your training programs and what you're doing in the learning organization, you're going to have higher success. You're going to have higher stickiness, retention of concepts, and you're going to see people using it 6 months down the road because of the senior leader involvement.
Super cool. I want to thank Douglas for his comment, his question today. I'm always, as always, I'm surprised at how quickly a half hour goes on these conversations. But David, tell us where, obviously letsgoleaders.com is the place where people look for you. Is there any other way that you'd have them reach out, or any other channel like that?
That's the place. You can find everything there. Every book, we've got thousands of articles, including articles on this subject for people looking for more information. And I appreciate you putting the newest book comes out May 14th, Powerful Phrases for Dealing with Workplace Conflict. Very practical, 300 plus phrases you can use to deal with all kinds of different situations that you encounter at work and build collaboration in your teams. And that's available for pre-order now.
Super cool. Thank you so much for your time today. I wish you all the best.
Hey, Laddick, my pleasure. Thank you.